Hi, I'm Brian Gibson, CEO and founder of i2x Solutions.
And I'm Chris Mills, Chief Research Officer of i2x Solutions.
Chris, myself, and a host of others at i2x have worked on hundreds of Aderant client projects over the years. And through those projects, we've seen the most uber technical all the way to pure business consulting. In each one of those engagements, one theme has stood clear: data.
Data is the lifeblood of your expert system, and it drives many business processes from capturing time through sending out bills and realizing payment. Unfortunately, even if you have small problems with simple data like names or addresses, duplicative client contacts, that sort of thing, you can have big errors with your billing, and that can prolong your billing process. Fortunately, this is an easy problem to fix, and what we're going to focus on is making simple changes that can allow you to quickly realize return on your investment.
So for this thought leadership, we figured we would present you with 3 individual videos. Each of these videos will walk you through a specific example in expert data and present you with a way on how to take advantage of that area of expert. Stay tuned to learn more about bill group, client-payer relationships, and contact data management in Aderant Expert.
Names and addresses are 2 of the most deceptively complicated pieces of data inside of Expert. But from a data management perspective, they're really, really important because they touch so many different areas of the system. So from things like marketing and onboarding new clients, all the way through billing and collecting payments, this data is owned by many different teams of many different people, and those people have a stake not only in the data, but also the business processes that data drives. The 2 most prevalent issues around names and address management are really inaccuracies in the data and missing data. And you can imagine inaccuracies leading to false conflicts, hits or misses, for example, or missing billing data requiring some research in order to find the accurate billing contact or billing address. And so these are 2 great examples of how downstream processes can just fail to function because of poor data quality or poor data curation up front. An example of how this kind of works end to end is you might have a client, ABC Corporation, and they're very large, but they're not necessarily your largest client. And that client changes their name to XYZ Corporation. It might be that the change is first detected when you're going to add a new matter for that client. And so if the person doing data entry in new business intake isn't careful, they're going to go in and try to search for this new client name. They're not going to find that new client name, and they're ultimately going to end up creating a new client and associating the new matter with that new client. This is really a problem because now you have duplicative client records in your expert system. So you have one that's ABC Corporation, you have another that's XYZ Corporation, and behind the scenes, these client records have identical contacts, they have identical billing information and parties. And so now what you have are 2 copies of a client record that are ultimately going to be maintained at different paces, right? So one of them might be associated with new matters going forward, another might be associated with old matters, but the billing contact information, the billing addresses, all of that stuff needs to stay in lockstep in order to actually bill that client accurately. And so while this is a cooked up example, it really kind of illustrates how easily you can fall into procedural issues purely centered around a lack of data quality or data integrity. So best practices for upkeep of names, upkeep of addresses is really to try to search for a record before you blindly add that record. And so this means incorporating things like names reconciliation in your conflicts process or somewhere in your matter intake process, and using things like validation in order to catch duplicates that were part of a bulk insert or part of your original conversion, so on and so forth. And so ultimately what we're talking about is incorporating the process of updating or curating your data into the existing billing processes. One of the most complicated pieces of the puzzle are really synonyms and abbreviations. And so if you don't have a story around trying to detect synonyms, so Ted and Theodore being the same, or Avenue and AVE, the abbreviation being the same, then this is one thing that you can incorporate into your process that really will provide lots of return on investment. And so what you want to do is use something like synonym expansion to periodically detect that inconsistencies exist in your tables and try to automatically resolve those by turning all of the avenues into the abbreviation or turning all of the abbreviation into the avenue or the expanded word. And so the idea here is that Jonathan Smith and John Smith might be completely different name records, but they might be the exact same person. And by reconciling those records into one record, you're going to have a better handle on your business processes going forward. The take-home message around all of this is that name and address data seems really simple, but it's used everywhere inside of Expert. And if your firm is proactive about managing that data, you're less likely to fall into traps later. And so this is an area of Expert where low initial effort to try to clean up abbreviations or clean up synonyms can result in really high payoff later by improving the billing process, getting bills out faster, and having sort of fewer issues overall in terms of conflicts and the onboarding process. So this all kind of hinges on the idea of cleaning up an initial problem and trying to keep that clean through business process. And obviously how you want to go about this is starting with the most squeaky operational areas that you can find. So areas where you know there's room for improvement, and you can automate that improvement by using some sort of new technology or incorporating technology into your existing business process.
In this presentation, we're going to cover uses, issues, and best practices for maintaining clean client and payer data in Aderant Expert. Setting up new clients requires that one knows some basic billing directions, but we all know those can vary widely from client to client. For instance, in insurance law, you typically have clients' matter work paid for by a third party. In this case, you will have clients who do not pay their own bills, but will require association with another entity to pay them. Within Expert, you get the flexibility to configure these arrangements limitlessly. However, that can come with the cost of complexity, which can lead to data issues. And incorrect data can ultimately lead to lost efficiencies in billing and intake processes. Payors are stored in the client table in Expert as special client records. These special client records cannot have matters and cannot be used to record time or expenses. However, they are used to specify payment responsibility for bill groups. Due to the way that payors are stored as client records, linking too many payors with a single client can lead to performance issues. Always remember, clients can be payors, but payors cannot be clients. When taking on new work, the names of people and businesses are critical to finding conflicts. With the tangled nature of some company structures, getting accurate data into Expert for intake can be complicated. However, doing so accurately is crucial for finding conflicts and managing risks. Expert allows for parent-child client relationships, but you also often need to search client parties or external systems. Since intake relies on stored and collected name and address data, risk management in your firm is directly tied to its accuracy. Now here's an example. ABC Corporation is dealing with litigation where each matter's bill will be paid by one or more of several insurance companies. During setup, if you associate payer address for the insurance company with the client through a bill group, Expert will link that payer name and address to the client as a party. Future conflict searches will likely lead to an increase in false positives due to non-adverse hits. With more hits to review, the intake process inevitably slows down. So what do we do? Remember that billing guidelines rule the billing process. Always ensure that billing methods are fully understood. However, some simple rules can help. When clients pay their own bills, use the bill group to specify the payer name and address information. These additional names and addresses will be associated with that client through parties and names. When bills are paid by other clients, set up special client payer records for the payers and reuse that name and address information in relevant bill groups across many clients and matters. So what are our best practices? First, remember that clients and payers are just businesses. Some businesses pay their own bills and others do not. Separate your payers and clients as distinct entries in Expert. Also support and encourage proper reuse by cleaning and maintaining clean payer records. And focus on getting the right data at the point of intake, as this will smooth out the entire process. When you do these things, your operational processes see improvements in billing speed, conflicts accuracy, and market analysis. So what do we take home? Well, the name and address data used for billing is directly derived from client and payer setup. Additionally, your conflicts, intake, and marketing processes rely on this data for risk and opportunity management. And while Expert allows you to support billing scenarios flexibly, it also increases the complexity and confusion when dealing with names and addresses. So just remember, a consistent and structured approach to client and payer setup is critical for operational success.
Bill groups are a specifically Aderant concept that really boils down to how data reuse can be implemented when you have a scenario when a client has multiple matters underneath it that have slightly different billing configuration. So what bill groups do at their core is store matter billing information, and that information tells you the who, the what, the where, the how, the when of billing for a specific matter. And this bill group concept allows multiple matters to be grouped together by how similar or exactly the same this billing configuration is. So this promotes reuse in that if you have a client that has 300 matters, it's very unlikely that you're going to have 300 entirely unique billing setups. It's much more likely that you're going to have maybe a handful of contacts, a handful of addresses, and a handful of bill formats that all together represent sort of universe of billing configurations that that client can request. And so what bill groups allow you to do is impose data standardization and promote code and data reuse and support really complicated arrangements where potentially payers that are not the client are responsible for paying the bills for a matter. And all of these scenarios look the same and are stored the same inside of Expert. And at their core, what bill groups do is they bring name information, address information, and payer information together. And so you can imagine a payer has a list of bill groups. Each matter that that payer is responsible for will have a bill group that explains how that payer is going to pay for the bills associated with that matter. So the bill group is going to give you information about the contact that should be related to billing. It's going to give you information about where the bill should be sent in terms of address. It's going to give you information about the bill format, about specific guidelines on that bill, so on and so forth. And so name and address data is really important to the overall quality of these bill groups. So if you have many duplicate addresses or many duplicate names, many duplicate contacts, your data quality for bill groups is going to be at least as poor as the quality of that names and addresses information. So while bill groups themselves are very flexible and allow you to have many different sort of billing configurations and bill drastically differently based on the needs of a client, it also comes with it a whole bunch of pitfalls. And the first of those is that it's really kind of hard to explain to secretaries and to data entry personnel what a bill group is and how it's actually helping them accomplish any of these goals. So common problems are really that under the covers, a bill group is a combination of fields in a database. So these fields define the unique set of data that represents a bill group. And changing one of those fields often necessitates creating a whole new bill group. The ideology behind this really is that you don't necessarily want to change a bill group during the billing process. You don't necessarily want to change a bill group with a bunch of outstanding bills associated with it. And so because of this, and because of the fact that data compliance rules at large don't really exist out of the box, there are real issues around redundancy in bill group data, around missing bill group data, and confusion for people who are trying to associate matters during intake to bill groups so that the billing process and the collections process can sort of seamlessly interact with new business intake. So some examples of how bill group data collection and bill group data itself can kind of get sideways is often around sort of data capture being loose. That is, it doesn't necessarily have validation rules in place. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of structure imposed on it. And so if you have a lot of really free-form text box data entry, what you end up with is duplicative bill groups, and it's very hard for a user at matter intake to understand the distinction between these bill groups. And so if you have 4 bill groups that have the exact same contact, the exact same billing address, the exact same format, they're effectively going to pick one at random, and it isn't necessarily clear even during billing that they've chosen the correct one. And so this confusion at intake ultimately results in issues during billing, where billing potentially doesn't have the information that they need in order to generate a bill, and all of this inefficiency causes delays in the bill group or the billing process. So long-term effects of this are that not only are you going to have potentially duplicative bill group data, but throughout the life of a client, you're going to be onboarding more and more and more matters, and potentially you're going to get more and more and more duplicative bill groups. So while you might early in the client's lifecycle have 2 or 3 duplicative bill groups, by the time that client has been around for many years and has many matters associated with it, you could have dozens or hundreds of bill groups built up for billing purposes. And so ultimately what happens is downstream, matters are going to get associated with what we call the seems like the correct bill group. And so on the surface, these bill groups may seem accurate, and some very kind of deeply hidden information inside of that bill group could be incorrect, and those inaccuracies will complicate the billing process as you're trying to get bills out the door. And so ultimately, even if you get through those billing issues, collections is going to eventually inherit many of those issues on the back end. So for example, if you have bill groups that use the name override or the address override to associate billing information for a payer that is not for that client, you're going to end up with collection activities that are very difficult for a user using expert collections to actually use to realize AR. So what you have to do is be really kind of careful about the way that you're onboarding bill group data, the way that you're curating bill group data, and ensure that that is in line with your collection strategy. And so if you're going to perform collections at the payer level and you have bill groups that allow clients to impose essentially overrides that attempt to be payers, it's going to be harder for somebody to actually use expert collections to its full potential. So in terms of best practices, what we find is performing duplication checks at intake, be it through workflow or be it through entity manager or something like that, in addition to a periodic review of that billing data, allows you to rest assured that during billing, you're not going to stumble upon some sort of data issue that's going to cause a delay in billing. We've also had some success in leveraging so-called meta-search algorithms to identify what we call functional duplicates. And so a functional duplicate is effectively a bill group that has all of the fields that your firm cares about being the same, but some fields are different. So if your billing process does not necessarily take the billing employee on a bill group into account, or the pre-bill coordinator on a bill group into account, and that is the only difference between 2 or 3 bill groups, then those 2 or 3 bill groups may not be duplicates in terms of database records, but they are bill groups or duplicate bill groups in terms of your billing process. And so we've had success using meta-search to find those, using field level weighting, and we've also had some experience performing synonym expansion to cast a sort of wider net to ensure that you aren't having bill group entries associated with the incorrect client. So what this synonym expansion is typically used for is identifying when a bill group has been used to usurp the idea of a payer and kind of simplify that payer information as a bill group override for a specific client. And so while that may work for some cases, in general, it's best to have one kind of storage strategy for all of your different billing data. The take home around all of this is that build groups, when used appropriately, can and do increase data reuse and data reliability. However, because they are deeply rooted in billing data and in accounting data, these can be very confusing to people who are performing data entry for matter intake. And so what you want to do is reduce the user interaction with specific billing questions as much as possible, and actually present to them UI or user experiences that allow them to select from a very transparent list of build groups, so that they can sort of rest assured that they are not essentially picking a build group at random, that they are making an intelligent, sort of informed choice about how a specific matter should be billed and by whom they will be paid. And a really kind of overarching idea is that what you want to do is try to simplify build groups as much as possible by reducing old billing data, by reducing duplicative business data, and standardize all that data at intake. Again, whether that's through some sort of workflow process or through periodic review at entity manager, either one will really make sure that you're not going to stumble into billing issues at the time of billing, and you can kind of be proactive about catching those issues prior to actually generating a bill. And so these are our ideas around how to best use build groups and how you can reduce kind of the complexity and the misunderstandings that often crop up when trying to implement build groups for the first time, or when trying to clean up build groups where you've been using an expert system for a while and you know that you have some data inconsistencies in the tables.
So the take home is that data is really important to all the various different parts of Expert, and what we hope that you take away from this video is a little bit more information on how you can curate your data and sort of immediately reap the benefits of having clean and complete Expert data.
And these are just a few of the many ways your firm can take advantage of expert data to increase its performance. To learn more, visit our virtual booth at i2xsolutions.com/momentum2021, connect with us on social media, or head over to our website and sign up for email notifications. And if you like this type of content, let us know. We're happy to produce more. Thanks a lot for your time.